Renault Captur is translated from Polish. Captur means hood. So what do we have under the hood? Yes, nothing special. The old well-known engines, 1.6 hours 4 minutes and 2.0 F4R with soars, like the Duster. According to their characteristics, the units are not at all formidable, but sometimes dirty, since both of them periodically bother with oil leaks. The F4R has a particularly tight situation with this. He will definitely let the snot. It remains only to guess where it will burst, through the pan gasket, the crankshaft oil seal, or the seals of the phase control valve. Many owners of 2-liter Capturs called the car grunting due to the sound that the CCV begins to make over time. His singing does not lead to anything terrible, and to return the silence, it is enough to disassemble and clean the valve, or change it. The procedure is simple. Closer to the first 100 the gas distribution clutch may knock. And that's it. No scoring and cranking of liners up to 300,000 kilometers if you change consumables in a timely manner and do not buy gasoline anywhere. The 1.6 H4M HR16DE chain motor sometimes leaks only through one of the crankshaft oil seals. Otherwise, there are fewer problems with it, and the resource will be even greater. In general, whichever engine you choose, any will be reliable and people will appreciate it, which means that in this regard, Captur is an invader. Too bad it's sometimes dirty. Before you choose one of the motors, you will have to take into account that their gearboxes are completely different and the list of weaknesses will be significantly different. The most reliable Captur will turn out if you prefer a 1.6 engine with a mechanical 5-speed. Problems are practically non-existent. If you take a look at the 2-liter version with a 6-speed manual transmission, then it is better to abandon the cars of the first years of production, as there is a risk of running into a flying-out reverse gear. The disease was treated mainly under warranty, but, as the practice of selecting a car shows, not all Captur owners turn to the dealer for such little things. About the variator is a separate issue. Renault Captur 1.6 received the JATCO JF015E unit, belonging to the CVT 7 generation, as a VPP. Behavioral indicators are simply wonderful, close to the nature of the usual machine. However, as is usually the case, there are owners who encountered the first breakdowns before driving 50,000 kilometers, noting that Captur is not an invader, but a real toilet. Fortunately, there are few such cases. Given the small mass of the car and the relatively calm urban target audience, the JF015E is on average ready to serve about 200 TkM, but on one condition: the owner will change the oil in the transmission every 30 to 40 TkM, not forgetting to set the level on the computer and reset the counter-aging. Due to the complexity of the design, the maintainability of the current variator is lower. Therefore, when the main elements, belt, cones, bearings, oil pump, valve body, are worn out, it is still more expedient to replace the entire box. The manufacturers decided to pair the 2-liter Captur with the old, I would even say, ancient, 4-speed automatic of the DP2 series, which has sold quite a large circulation around the world. The weak points of the box are known to everyone, and usually they relate to sensitivity to overheating and oil cleanliness. If you ignore the recommendations for updating the fluid every 40 to 50 TkM, you can run into sticking of the valve body valves, and this, in turn, leads to overheating and frying of the clutches. Driving style is also desirable to moderate, especially in the heat. Nothing critical happens to the hardware of the other parts of the transmission. Minor problems are caused only by rubber elements, rear gear seals, and CV joint anthers, which especially do not like the cold. What is overheating or failure of the electromagnetic clutch for connecting the rear wheels to the owners is still unknown. Calling the Renault Captur suspension an unreliable language does not turn out, but some of the engineers' decisions seem very strange. The main question is, why did the stabilizer bushings become non-removable? That's right, they were simply fused to the SPU bar. Okay, the Germans in this regard are perverts, but Renault-Nissan was unexpected. You know what's even more interesting? On average, stabilizer bushings, together with rods, live 25,000 kilometers. Should I change the stabilizer once a year? Of course not. The owners simply adjust the size of the substitutes. Otherwise, Renault is recognizable in Captur. Up to 100,000 kilometers, no more problems. After that, it may be necessary to replace the shock absorbers, ball joints of the front levers, and front hubs. The steering is also nothing new. Like the related Duster, the Captur suffers from oil leaks in the power steering pipe and booster pump. If the technical sores did not affect every owner of the Renault Captur, then the claims to the rubber elements of the model are rampant. Regular windshield wipers fly into the trash almost immediately. Door seals quickly dry out and deform, adding visual aesthetics to tight closing doors. Top-end versions with a sunroof suffer from a particularly unpleasant sore. It can begin to let rainwater into the cabin. Almost everyone was caught by the problem with the loss of autorun. The culprit is the hood or driver's door limit switch. The detail is simple. The owners have adapted to treat it on their own, and not without the participation of electrical tape, of course. The hood lock is often changed by dealers in a recall campaign, and no one has ever had any visible comments on it. Engineers think differently, but the paintwork pleased. It was expected that Duster problems with increased chipping will migrate to Captur, but there are no complaints. More precisely, they are, but the owners are mainly concerned about the tendency to scratches and scuffs. But nothing, everyone is used to it. By the way, when choosing a used Renault Captur, or rather, when measuring the thickness of the paintwork, you will have to take into account the combined color so as not to swear at the seller in vain for lying. On the rear pillars and the roof, the layer will be almost twice as large, that is, about 200 microns. Expect something supernatural from the salon is not worth it. In addition to the cable drive of the climate system, nothing breaks and does not fall off for no reason. The usual budget interior with branded non-wear-resistant materials and scratchy, talking plastic. If the car has traveled 100,000 kilometers, then it will be immediately visible, even if the seller, who twisted the mileage, resews the shabby steering wheel. By the way, the mileage here is duplicated in the ABS block. Most often, the active mileage in the ECU is not touched, simply by programmatically untying the dashboard, which means that in most cases the real mileage can be checked using scanners. As an auto picker, I love the Europeans for this. Let's get back to the title. How to call Renault Captur, formidable or dirty, toilet or invader? Much will depend on which unit you choose. It is dangerous to buy a car on a CVT with a mileage of more than 150 km. It is too likely that one day you yourself will call it a terrible toilet after you find out the cost of the gearbox. Kilometers up to 100,000 kilometers are relatively safe, but on condition that the oil for the VPP was changed when and how it should be. It is a pity that it is impossible to check this 100%. Captur with 1.6 on the manual transmission is definitely a formidable invader. No major flaws or weaknesses. You just have to take care of the aesthetics and monitor the anthers of the drives. Any version with a 2.0-liter engine is also without deep-sea stones, but due to the highly likely oil streaks of the engine and gearbox, the invader will want to be called dirty. One way or another, you definitely shouldn't refuse it, especially if you are going to buy a car with automatic transmission with a solid mileage. Hyundai Santa Fe 3. I'll tell you, Hyundai Santa Fe 3 fell ill with an illness that they are usually embarrassed to talk about. Santa has an STD. It would seem, where does a family car get such and such sores? But they are. The owners decipher it as the famous all-wheel drive prevention. Korean engineers intentionally or accidentally did not protect the spline joints of the bevel gear from moisture and dust, from which the moving parts, in the absence of due attention, become corroded, and by 70,000 kilometers the shafts are ground into meat due to the abundance of negative environment. To prevent this from happening, you have to lubricate the splines yourself every 30 to 40 km, because dealers are most often silent about the manufacturer's miscalculations and prefer only to analyze flights. Every knowledgeable owner is engaged in prevention, and those who do not yet know about the existing problem or decide to forget and score, pay for this recklessness by replacing the entire gearbox assembly with drives. Expensive? And how? But that's not all. The all-wheel drive Hyundai Santa Fe 3DM is seriously ill, and the next weak point here is the electromagnetic clutch for connecting the rear axle manufactured by Dynamax. It is worth once unsuccessfully to apply to the gas pedal on an unstable surface when, for example, the front wheels are on ice and the rear wheels are on asphalt, and you can hear a ringing blow in the back. And what is it so mumbled? Perhaps at first you are like Piglet, who carelessly ruined something dear to you, do not believe what happened and think that the automatically connected all-wheel drive is somehow rude. Indeed, rude. But next time the stern wheels will not work soon. Just the same, due to too sharp operation of the clutch basket breaks off from the shaft, which is why the owners have to look for a specialized service for the repair of such units, or fork out for such a new part, which is just as unreliable. In the event of such a breakdown, no errors on the panel sometimes light up, and sometimes you can find out about what happened only in a situation in which all-wheel drive will be needed more than ever. When checking a used Hyundai Santa Fe 3 in the summer, a malfunction can only be ruled out on a lift. In winter, it is enough to start abruptly on ice and follow the inclusion of the rear axle in operation. There are much fewer questions for the rest of the Santa Fe DM transmission units. The manual gearbox itself is indestructible, and it's time to worry only about the clutch, and then for a run of 150 km. Automatic A6 LF23 will be thinner. Some owners even manage to try out the entire resource of the box, which averages from 200 to 250,000 kilometers, depending on operating conditions and approach to maintenance. To extend the life of the automatic transmission, it is better to change the oil every 40 km. Otherwise, the automatic is unpretentious, if you do not take into account that the first versions of Santa Fe 3 were equipped with defective units with the central gear bolts not properly tightened. No. Seizures in the cylinders of the chain 2.4-liter G4KE unit are not found. There are no major and frequent problems here at all, and the resource allows you to skate at least 300,000 kilometers without a capital. If there is anything to worry about, it is usually a harmless oil leak, such as a sump or front engine cover. The chain itself performs its function as it should, and the problems of premature pulling, as on the Rio Solaris, are not encountered here. The V-shaped 3.3-liter G6DF engine is in nature, but to meet such an exotic is a great success. For the Hyundai Santa Fe, it's like the W12 for the Touareg. It's not worth chasing this engine in a used form, as it is slightly inferior to its 2.4-liter counterpart in reliability. The culprit was the oil burner. The problem usually appears and begins to progress after 100,000 kilometers due to an increased tendency to carbon deposits on pistons and rings. Decarbonizing once every 50 km will help delay the onset of the inevitable death of the CPG, and it is likely that the engine will last more than 250 km. Otherwise, it's unlikely. Another mine in the wallet of the owner of Santa Fe from 3.3 was thrown by the timing system without hydraulic lifters. Every 100,000 kilometers you will have to adjust the valve clearances, and there are 12 of them for each half of the motor. Quite routine work will cost a pretty penny. Get a diesel. If you change the oil in time and fill in high-quality diesel fuel, then at low mileage the 2.2 D4HB diesel engine is absolutely harmless. Of the little things, only a modest service life of the dual-mass flywheel on versions with manual transmission. By the 200,000th run, the high-pressure fuel pump is already wearing out, and it's not worth waiting for the first bells at such a mileage, otherwise the broken chips from the pump will instantly finish off expensive nozzles. It is better to change the injection pump immediately than to restore the entire fuel system. You don't need to expect surprises from the turbine before 250 km. It won't make noise, it won't drive oil into the intake. It is better to pay all attention to the EGR afterburning system, which pollutes the intake tract with soot in a short time. To solve the problem, there are two options left: to constantly clean the throttle manifold, or to carry out easy chip tuning with turning off the recirculation valve. I don't know about you, but option number 2 is closer to me. The reliability of the elements of the Hyundai Santa Fe chassis does not stand out among the majority of classmates. Typical average. Of the weak points here are wheel bearings. By 100,000 kilometers, the bushings and stabilizer struts end, then by 150 tkm, the ball and rear silent blocks of the front levers get tired in order. The front shock absorbers with supports are tenacious and sometimes pass 200 tkm without replacements. The resource of silent blocks and shock absorbers of the rear suspension will depend on the type of drive. The mounting scheme of the levers is significantly different. The multi-link all-wheel drive Santa Fe serves the least, about 150 tkm. Phew. The only reassurance is that changing gum is not difficult and not expensive. Front-wheel drive versions are a little more reliable, but it is unlikely that you will be able to drive more than 200 tkm without knocking. It was a heavy car. The Hyundai Santa Fe 3 body deserves the least comments. It does not rust, the paintwork does not fall off for no reason. Reliable. Jamming of the drive for opening the gas tank flap is easily, quickly, and, interestingly, independently eliminated by the owners. Chronic incontinence of doorstops, unfortunately, is not treated in any way, except for replacing parts with new ones. Otherwise, the body resists the external environment better than the same.